Morning, all. All right, so starting things off today with a 32 team video. Yep. And I'm thinking that maybe next season I'll do a 32 team video once every other week. I'm thinking. Now, today, what I want to talk about is just players that I think are either a little bit under the radar. Maybe I feel like they deserve a little more praise, or I'll go ahead and admit in some cases these players have proven me wrong and proven a lot of people wrong with how they've played so far this season. So, all 32 teams. Divisions, yes. Alphabetical order in divisions, no. So Pacific, Central, Atlantic, and then Metro. We all good? Good. Let's go ahead and jump in with Vancouver. And I made a rule for myself. No Sherwood. I've talked about Sherwood plenty. I've not talked about Suter a lot though. In a market where you're going to get a lot of criticism, I've heard zero criticism towards Pius Suter this year. Other than maybe at times people saying he's playing a more prominent role in the lineup than he should, it does kind of indicate they need a little more depth down the middle. But Suter's been good wherever they've used him, wherever they've put him. He has been a very good forward for the Vancouver Canucks. His work ethic's through the roof, so I felt like Suter's the one for them. Edmonton. I've talked about Ekholm over the years. I do remember there was one year where I was ranking defensemen. I had Ekholm, I think, in the top 10. And there were some that did kind of a double take on that. I maintain that Ekholm is an excellent defenseman, and Edmonton, for all the critics that don't think they have a good enough blue line, I understand, but I think this year, I think their blue line's actually been pretty good, and Ekholm's been a driving force there defensively. He's got some offensive skill as well. He's not shy around physical play. I really don't find anything negative about Ekholm. Calgary. Now, for Calgary, I looked up and down the lineup and I thought, you know what? I want to give some praise to Jonathan Huberdeau. Huberdeau, yeah, he'll never live up to that contract, fine. But he has reached 20 goals for the fastest he's ever reached 20 goals in a season in his career. He's become a little more. I don't know if well-rounded's the right term, but it does feel like his game has changed. In Florida, he was primarily pass first. He'd get 70 assists in a season kind of thing. Now in Calgary, he is a player who can score. He does have his share of assists as well. And if he keeps putting the puck in the net as well as he has been, it should open up some more trading or passing lanes for him in order to get more assists. So Huberdeau's had quite a year, and I've been impressed. Comparatively speaking, with the first couple of seasons in Calgary, I think this year's been pretty good for him. Vegas, with Vegas, I went with. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to look, but I'm gonna look. Because with Vegas, I went back and forth, and I went with Dorofiev. Dorofiev has become that goal scorer that I always kind of felt like he could be if they gave him the ice time. I've always been impressed with his shot, and he's been quite good. On a Vegas team that has had its struggles lately, Dorofiev has been excellent. So he has stayed remarkably consistent, and if Vegas heats up again, I would expect he'll be a prominent player for them come playoff time. And if they win the division, look out. Vegas is the team I would be frightened of in the playoffs because they got knocked out early last season and might take that out on some teams this season. For Seattle, pretty easy pick for Seattle, to be honest. Early in the season, I was concerned with Shane Wright. He was kind of invisible. It felt like maybe his trajectory had stalled, and we might be looking at a player who's busting. Not that I ever use the word bust with Shane Wright because I don't generally do that. I don't know if people notice that or not. And it's not because I'm just like all positive about everything. It's because until a player's in their mid 20s, you just never know. Referring to somebody as a bust can come back to haunt you. And it would have because Shane Wright has been excellent for Seattle lately. He started finding the back of the net. He's got some good speed and he's got a great shot. So Shane Wright has finally started to become the player that he was projected to be all those years ago. For Anaheim, Anaheim was pretty easy, and it's one of the reasons I'm doing this list because I was watching one of the most recent Anaheim games and saying to myself that Jackson Lacombe, he has taken that next step this year. I wasn't that sure at points with Lacombe if it was going to turn out positively for him at the NHL level, but as a defenseman, you have to give him time, and you have to have some faith in that. And I think there are instances around the National Hockey League where fans, coaches, and GMs don't necessarily have the patience with young players that they should, and they end up developing pretty well. And Lacombe is an example of that in Anaheim, where, yeah, Anaheim could have said, well, You know, Lacombe, there's some struggles here and there. No, he's been given every opportunity. He's been very good. LA, another reason I'm doing this video. See, when I'm watching hockey games, this stuff all piles up. Where I'm watching a game, I'm like, yeah, I'm really impressed. And Gavrikov's really impressed me for the LA Kings. And so it's not something that I can throw into a news of the day video. It's not something that I mean, I might mention it in a review, but not everybody watches the reviews. So I feel like a video like this, I get a chance to say Gavrikov's been very good for the LA Kings, and consistently good for the LA Kings, I think. And he's shown a little more offensive flair than I'm used to from Gavrikov as well, or maybe it's just something I hadn't noticed previously. But Gavrikov has had a very strong season so far for the LA Kings. San Jose. If you're a Detroit fan, maybe just mute the video for the next, I don't know, 30 seconds. Jake Wallman. Wallman was on the outs in Detroit, goes to San Jose. He's been their best defenseman. And he's been very good offensively. He has shown that people that believed in Wallman were right. He's had a really strong run for the San Jose Sharks so far. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Wallman from here and how much money that's going to be worth the next time he has a contract due. But Wallman's been excellent for a San Jose team that desperately needed a defenseman like him. I would say he's the best point man they've had since Carlson exited. I think I can say that without anybody going, all right, that's a terrible take. I mean, they can say it, right? Any people can say it. Colorado. So, being a backup goaltender in the NHL is a perilous journey. And Wedgwood is a very interesting case in that early this season with Nashville, he didn't play very well. He didn't look very good. And there have been points in his career where Wedgwood has had rough stats, hasn't played very well. There's also been points where Wedgwood's been very good. He was a good backup for Dallas, and now he's a good backup for the Colorado Avalanche. So Wedgwood might be one of the most up and down goaltenders that I've seen, but right now he's playing well, and yeah, I think that maybe it's a reflection of when he feels comfortable and he's happy. Maybe that helps reflect his numbers. Maybe he wasn't all that happy in Nashville, but either way, Wedgwood's been quite good for Colorado, and all of a sudden goaltending's no longer an issue for the Avalanche. For Dallas, Thomas Harley. Harley is really rounding out to be. I know Heiskanen's their best defenseman, but Harley's close. For me, Harley's close. So with Heiskanen being out, Harley gets a more prominent role, and it doesn't make me nervous. Even though he's younger, I don't get nervous thinking, I hope Harley can handle this. I think he's fine, and Dallas is in good hands. And this experience with Heiskanen out and Harley getting a more prominent role on all the special teams, I think it can only benefit him down the road. For Winnipeg, and Winnipeg's got a lot of players that I like. They do. For all of THG doesn't like the Jets. He pretends he does because his wife. Why would I do that? She doesn't pretend she likes the Bruins. But anyway, it's such a weird take from people that like somehow if I said something bad about the Jets, that somebody's going to report it to her and she's going to come in here yelling at me. Anyways, it'd make a funny video though, wouldn't it? So, Comrie. I've seen Jets fans talking about, Comrie's not a very good backup, so that's why he doesn't get the goal support. What are you talking about? Previous years, I would agree with you. Previous years, like last season, I didn't think Comrie played very well at all. And I was kind of surprised when Winnipeg brought him back as the backup. But so far, this has worked out really well for the Jets. Goaltending is not a problem, starter or backup. While Comrie's overall career numbers have been middle of the road, he's been excellent for Winnipeg this year. So good on him for getting a shutout most recently, and they're finally starting to give him some goals. Nashville, I went with a rookie here. There are players that I will tell you might be one to watch. And to me with Nashville, while it's been a disastrous season, Svechkov's one that I would watch. Svechkov is a good two-way forward, and that comes from his scouting reports before he was drafted. And I don't know if he's ever going to be a top-line guy, but he could end up being a very good second-line forward at some point in his career, maybe as early as next season. I like Svechkov's game. I think he's already showing some poise at the NHL level that, I mean, for a rookie is impressive. So we'll see what the rest of his career looks like. But while this season's been mostly a disaster for Nashville, Svechkov I think has been good. For Minnesota, there was a time where there were legitimate questions of whether or not Rossi would become a National Hockey League player, and definitely whether or not he'd become a regular, having health issues and everything. Marco Rossi now is one of the top forwards in Minnesota. I know that there were, I think it was a couple summers ago, I was ranking the top forwards in the NHL, and I put Boldy in there because I thought Boldy was fantastic, and he was in, the trajectory was such. I think Rossi's right there with him. Rossi might be a better forward than Boldy all around. But yeah, Rossi's been excellent for Minnesota. So while Minnesota's dealt with a lot of injury problems this year, Rossi's stepped up. He's been quite good. For Chicago, I don't think this player's going to be in Chicago much longer. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded during the Four Nations tournament, and that's Ryan Donato. Donato is one of those players who has bounced around the league. At times he's been an extra, and at times he's been seen as not being very good. I remember in Boston when he was being healthy scratched, and there was debates about his play, but he's been quite good for Chicago. Even when he's not producing, he's still a good bottom six forward, and I think he's got it to the point now where I think Chicago's going to get a decent return for Donato when they do decide to make that move. And I wouldn't be surprised either to see Donato end up back in Chicago next season afterwards. Yeah, Donato's been good, and I think Chicago's been good to Donato. It's been mutually beneficial. For St. Louis was tough. So I'm kind of cheaping out on this one, and it's Dylan Holloway. The two offer sheets that were made by St. Louis were the right call. Both Broberg and Holloway have been good for them, and there's a strong future for both. Holloway, though, I think his game has matured a lot in St. Louis, and probably in a way that it might not have in Edmonton. So he's playing a more primary role in St. Louis than he was ever going to do in Edmonton. Edmonton, he's always going to be more of the support player. The Blues just don't have as much top-end talent. And I don't think I'm saying anything crazy to say they don't have the top-end talent. The Oilers do. But yeah, Holloway, I think, has been impressive. For Utah, I've talked about this player earlier in the season. I remember talking about Barrett Hayton and how just offensively, just a black hole, didn't seem to be working. I was starting to wonder if Hayton would be in the long-term plans of Utah, because they're out of Arizona, so they have the ability to move players that maybe they wouldn't have if they'd stayed in Arizona, and maybe Hayton. But Hayton's played really well lately, and the points have started to come, the goals have started to as well. And so Hayton's got his trajectory back under control, and I've liked Hayton for years. There was the Hayton, Schmaltz, Keller line, which was the best line, one of the best lines, I think, in the second half of the season of 2022-2023, I want to say. And so it's nice to see now that Hayden's finally getting back to where he was then. So we get into the East. We start with Tampa. And I'm going to praise a veteran here because Ryan McDonough has been fantastic defensively in Tampa. He has, while the interesting thing is, if you think about it, so they acquired McDonough's contract. They let Stamkos go. Stamkos signs in Nashville. If they hadn't acquired McDonough's contract had stayed in Nashville, does Nashville sign Stamkos? So, there you go. But yeah, McDonough has been quite good for Tampa Bay in his return. It's been seamless. Not all players have that seamless transition to a team. For McDonough, it's helped that he's played there before, of course, but he's showing that he still has a lot left in the tank. So I don't think McDonough's nearing the end of his career, unless he chooses to, but I don't think he has to. Toronto, I won't miss out on an opportunity to praise the defensive work of Chris Tanev. And when Tanev signed that contract, everybody, the injuries. Tanev, if you look over the last, I think it's 3 or 4 years, Tanev doesn't miss very much time with injury. He doesn't. So Tanev's injury concerns are always going to be out there. I think they're a little bit overblown at this point in time, to be completely honest. I think Tanev is he's a stalwart for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been quite good. And the honorable mention has to go to Ekman Larson. Both of those defensemen have been really good pickups by Brad Treliving in the Toronto Maple Leafs. For Ottawa, another defenseman. So we're on a run of defensemen at this point. That's Thomas Chabot. I'm glad to see Chabot's finally starting to get praise for being as good as he is. This is a team that obviously Sanderson gets big money, and Sanderson is not defensively as good as Chabot. Chabot's had a great year. The Ottawa Senators right now look like they're going to be a playoff team, and if they get in, Shabbat's not going to get a lot of consideration for the Norris, but that's a shame because I think he's been quite good for them. I'm not saying you put him in the category of the top 3 necessarily, but I think he's been maybe a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. Maybe. You guys can let me know your thoughts. Buffalo. Buffalo hasn't had a lot of feel-good moments and feel-good stories, but Kulik's been excellent. Especially recently, Kulik's been quite good for a Buffalo team that's starting to win its share of games. They're doing it too late in the season, which is kind of a storyline of the Buffalo Sabres. In fact, if the Sabres went on a tear from here and ended up finishing, say, 3 points short of the playoffs, that's a Buffalo thing to do. And Kulik might be the kind of forward that can help get him there. He's been really good for Buffalo. Been impressed with him. And, yeah, not a whole lot else to say on that matter, really. Detroit. Yes. So I talked about Edmondson, and immediately there were Wings fans that were like, "No, you got to talk about Johansson." All right, let's talk about Johansson. Offensively, not spectacular numbers, but defensively, work ethic, and potential for more scoring as he gets more comfortable and more mature at the NHL level. Johansson's been good. He's been good for them. Detroit is on quite the tear. Clearly, Todd McClellan's figured something out that they didn't have figured out before McClellan arrived. Lalone couldn't figure out, and Johansson might be one of those keys to this team making maybe that unexpected run to the playoffs after what was a lackluster start to the season. So we get over to Florida here as we start the third column. With Florida, this is a name I've mentioned before. I'm going to mention it again. Anton Lundell. At some point in time in his career, Lundell, I think, is going to be a point-per-game player. And maybe I'll be completely off on that. But Lundell has more offensive skill than I think people who may not watch Florida may not realize. I don't know, I was going to say Philadelphia. Philadelphia's even at the bottom of the board. But as you get older, it's just, well, it starts with a noise. Boy, I hope that doesn't become a trend, or I'm in dangerous trouble with getting demonetized and being G-rated. But yeah, so Lundell is my pick for the Florida Panthers. I think he is maybe at the NHL level a bit underrated as a two-way forward. He's an excellent two-way forward. He just happens to play on the same team as this guy named Barkov. For Montreal, and Montreal had a few different options with them. You want to talk about a player who's fit in right away? How about Alexander Carrier? They pick up Carrier from Nashville, and it's been very easy. He's been quite good on a Montreal blue line that needed that. And Carrier, as an addition, I think has meant that maybe one of those veteran defensemen is a little more expendable than they were. Because Carrier, at this point, I think can be qualified as a veteran, especially compared to a lot of the young blue liners in Montreal. And yeah, I don't think Carrier's going anywhere. I think Carrier's probably going to be in Montreal for the rest of his career, the way he's been playing lately. Boston, another player who got off to a slow start. But, man, Morgan Geekie loves it in Boston. He has to. Geekie's producing at a rate right now, similar to what he did last season, and he's putting up point totals that he never has in his career. Which is interesting because when Geekie went to Seattle back in 2021, I was like, well, this Morgan Geekie's a lot of potential. I think he could be a steal for Seattle. And it never really quite clicked there. And so I was like, all right, so I was wrong. I guess Geekie just isn't that kind of player. Yep, Geekie's offense has been good. So he just had to go to Boston first. Yeah, Geekie's my pick for them. For Washington, I had Poitras stuck in my head because I was looking over. I was like, right, is Poitras? No, Protas. Similar. Protas. Protas, his goal scoring, physical play, defensive play, and special teams work. There's not much that Protas can't do. While everybody's focused on Ovechkin's scoring, and there's been a lot of praise, rightfully so, for Dubois' ability to adapt, plus Logan Thompson's ridiculous numbers this season, Protas has quietly become one of the top power forwards in the game. And I really enjoy watching Protas. And at the time they signed Protas to that extension, I think it was just last year they signed that extension, there was some risk there because Protas hadn't shown that offense at the NHL level yet. He's paid them back in full. For their faith in him. New Jersey. So Timo Meier, I'm going to give similar praise as Huberdeau. Now, Timo Meier, the goal scoring, not where I think you might want it to be, but his overall production's been fine. And I think he's a better player for the New Jersey Devils right now. Or maybe it's just more notable in New Jersey than it was in San Jose. But I think Meier's playing some of his best hockey. I think that's a trade that kind of worked out for both teams. Meier goes to New Jersey, gets his contract, gets to play for a team that's in the playoffs. San Jose gets futures in the deal, which end up being pretty good for them too. And so, yeah, the Timo Meier trade I think has worked out for both teams. And Meier's having a very strong season in New Jersey. Even when he's not productive, Meier is still, I think, a positive for the New Jersey Devils. You guys can let me know in the comments how you feel about that. Carolina. Right. For Carolina, it's got to be Martinook. Martinook is a glue player in Carolina that I think is underrated outside of that market. And if you don't watch Martinook play, you might not realize just how good a player he is. And it just feels like he's very popular with the fan base, with teammates for a reason. And once you've watched him play some games, you understand why. I think Martinook is one of those underrated talents around the National Hockey League. Columbus. Speaking of really good pickups, Dante Fabro. Now, Fabro's not producing like he did when he got to Columbus, because that was ridiculous. But his overall numbers are still really good. And Columbus being in the playoff hunt right now isn't something that I think anybody had expected. I think Columbus themselves probably didn't expect that. Fabro has been really a strong defenseman for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Hopefully that continues. And once again, I'll say, if they make the playoffs, the Columbus flag goes up there. So they haven't done it yet, but if they did, I know the pennant's up there, but I'm just saying like a big Columbus flag goes up there. The Islanders. This is the only team that I've picked the number one point producer from. I don't think Huberdeau. Is Huberdeau the number one point producer for Calgary? Oh, I made myself a liar. Anyways, Horvat. Bo Horvat. Having a very strong season. Excellent in the face-off circle. Again. Very hardworking. Again. I think underrated as a two-way forward. Sure. And he gets the odd highlight reel goal too. So Bo Horvat has been quite the pickup for the New York Islanders. I did see a lot of Vancouver fans talking about when Miller left, that they picked the wrong one between Horvat and Miller. Yeah, Horvat's been quite good for the New York Islanders. I think they're happy. Yeah, his contract may age poorly at the end, but a lot of them do, and it's not necessarily a big deal. And now that the salary cap's going through the roof, that chatter's going to settle down too. For the New York Rangers, he reached his 400th win this week, and Jonathan Quick has provided good backup, reliable goaltending. Or good, reliable backup goaltending. That sounds better. Jonathan Quick has been very good for the New York Rangers. He did have his not great month in the middle there. I want to say it was a month where there were struggles, but everybody in New York struggling at that point in time. So, yeah, Jonathan Quick finally getting that 400th win is great. Someday soon I'll be doing a career video on Jonathan Quick, and maybe we'll be talking about the Rangers making it to the playoffs in 2025 and going on a run. Who knows? We shall see. For Pittsburgh, wasn't easy necessarily to find a really good story with Pittsburgh because there's been a lot of issues with Pittsburgh. But Blake Lazot's impressed me quite a bit when I've been watching Pittsburgh games. And Lazot's impressed me before. And that's the thing. It's work ethic. Sometimes it's good zone exits that I notice. Sometimes it's just the smart play with the puck. The guy who's not charging through four players thinking, I can do that. It's just four guys. The guy who decides, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to circle back, wait till I got a couple teammates with me, and then we'll figure something out. Lazot's a smart player. So I figured Lazot goes on the board. Which means we finish with Philadelphia. And you want a feel-good story out of Philadelphia. Is it better than Abels? Abels, 29 years of age. And I'm pretty sure I remember him as a prospect in NHL games I was playing years ago. So when he got called up, I was like, I know that name. That's got to be from the old NHL games. Because otherwise, there's no way I would know an Abels in the minor system. And he's been good for Philadelphia. He's honestly been good. So him making it to the National Hockey League at 29, and yes, honorable mention to Dominic Shine with Detroit, who made his debut at age 31. Don't give up on your dream. Becoming a National Hockey League player, sometimes it takes time. And in Abel's case, it took him until he was 29. But I think he's proven that he can play. The good news being that even if Philadelphia at some point goes, well, we're going to send him back down, there's other GMs that may have taken notice and said, maybe we'll pick him up. He's, going to be 30 years of age. We could pick him up next season, that kind of thing. Maybe he gets moved at the deadline, right? So, good story. It's always nice to see guys making their debut in the NHL later on. Although it is fun to see the ones come in at 18 too and see what they can do. But yeah, don't give up on your dreams, boys and girls. Anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I say boys and girls because I always kind of feel like I'm a teacher with a class. So it's kind of how it feels when I'm standing in front of the whiteboard. It is something people have said about me over the years. And yeah, that is kind of how it feels. Thanks for your support. It's greatly appreciated. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I will talk to you again soon.